Good morning. It's been a great 3 days. And clearly the main topic of conversation has been the intersection of AI and finance. And there is very few people in this world that are better equipped to speak to that topic. And that is the titan of the industry that we have right opposite me, Ben. Good morning, Ben. And,
Good morning.
Let's get going, talking about the topic at hand. But before we get there, let's actually start with a little bit of perspective. Mm-hmm. And it's now roughly 15 years since you and Mark founded the firm, correct?
Right.
And over the last 15 years, it's been an amazing success. The assets under management has increased 10x.
Yeah.
You guys have helped build companies that have become household names. And even at the same time, the interesting thing is the industry has shifted dramatically, right?
Yeah.
We were in the early days of cloud, and then internet actually, and then the cloud, the mobile architectural shift, and then social emerging as the dominant usage pattern, right?
Yeah.
So, and we're about to get into another dominant architectural shift. But let's start there. It's a little bit of an unfair question. If you had to encapsulate like 15 years of your learnings and principles on what you think made you successful amidst all of this technological change and betting on the right technology shifts and usage shifts, what would those be?
Yeah, well, that's a big question. You know, it's interesting. When we started the firm, the venture capital was very different in that there was a saying in venture capital that, look, there's only 15 new technology companies in any year that are ever going to make it to $100 million in revenue. And the whole venture capital kind of game is getting into as many of those 15 as possible. But then, you know, I think in 2011, my partner Mark wrote a piece called Software is Eating the World, which sort of predicted that 15 was going to get a lot bigger. And, you know, basically, essentially, that's what happened. And that's what's changed venture. You know, that's been a big change in venture capital as the market has grown, you know, probably 10 to 20-fold since we started in 2009 in terms of the number of companies that are worth investing in. And that's, I think the traditional venture capital firms just weren't ready for that because they were very traditional partnerships with shared economics and shared control. So they had a very difficult time scaling. So then it became, you know, us who kind of anticipated that at very high scale. We're about 600 people now. And then a bunch of very, very small firms, as opposed to what it used to be kind of a set of the same size firms, which is very, very different. And I would say quite interesting. The other thing that happened is the public markets in the US shrunk, which you wouldn't think they would, but with the kinds of regulatory things we put in place in the early 2000s, companies just don't want to go public, even though there are many more very large companies. And so those companies became part of venture capital landscape. And so growth investing and, you know, I think a lot of sovereign wealth funds are in venture capital and so forth for that reason, because there's just not that many growth companies in the public markets anymore. So that's, you know, that's been the shift. And it's been great for us because we're a new firm and we were able to adapt to those changes very quickly, whereas I think some of the firms that had been around 50 years had more trouble doing that.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I think we'll get to the impact of AI and investing in a second. But let's talk about this architectural shift, purely from a technologist perspective.
Right.
How would you describe this architectural shift compared to the ones that we just talked about or the ones that came before that? Yeah,
so, you know, if you look at, I mean, when we started the firm, we thought, wow, cloud and mobile, those are two pretty big new kind of platforms. And the way to think about venture capital, there's kind of what we call search mode, which is what's going to be the new platform that everything gets built on, and then hill climbing mode, which is, oh, we've got the platform, and now we're building all the applications. And, you know, we're kind of right between search and hill climbing. We know it's AI, but we don't know, like, what the actual kind of right platforms to build on are yet. So we're still funding at the kind of fundamental foundation model layer. I'd say the AI wave is significantly kind of bigger than cloud and mobile and social. And the reason is it's much more analogous to the microprocessor. So the kind of two big waves in computing are kind of computers and networks. So going all the way back to integrated circuits and microwave, and then LANs and PCs and mobile and the internet and so forth. And it always kind of grows like that. And now we're at AI is the new computer. So we've had this deterministic computer for years, and now we have a probabilistic computer. And the probabilistic computer turns out, solve just about every problem we couldn't solve with the old computer. So that's a huge problem space. And it turns out to be better at a lot of the old problems, particularly from a user interface standpoint, than the old computer. So it could be bigger than kind of all of existing software, and then a new category of software that's that big as well, and maybe beyond that, because it's a huge design space. So a really, really big wave. It's different also in the kinds of entrepreneurs. So if you go back, and it's actually interesting to me, it looks more like the beginning of the microprocessor industry with Intel and Texas Instruments and AMD, and that all the engineers kind of had a physics background. And now you look at AI, and the engineers are starting to have a physics background again and math background. Well, why is that? Well, it turns out that general regular computer kind of programming engineering, you understand the whole program and you can debug it. But in these AI systems, they're so whatever 230 billion, 600 billion, 700 billion parameters. Nobody can debug that. You can't go through and figure out what's going on, so you start to deal with systems properties. And some of you may have heard, in AI, if you want to make the kind of AI hallucinate less, you turn down the temperature. Well, temperature is a physics term. How fast are the molecules moving, et cetera. But that's how you're kind of governing the system. You're not anymore going, oh, that piece of code said that, and that's the wrong answer, so I'm going to change it to this. You're turning down the temperature. So it's a very new kind of entrepreneur, new kind of engineer, and it's exciting. It's super interesting.
Yeah, and it's a new kind of currency as well, tokens in and tokens out. And
exactly.
Exactly. But you said something interesting, because it's a probabilistic computer, and at least so far what we are seeing is the more compute you throw at it, the better the results approximate to accuracy, right? Just like anything probabilistic, there is a level of inaccuracy or hallucination, as they're calling it these days. Right? So, and we have not found when the increase in compute results in asymptotic leveling of quality yet, right? So
we're kind of at that point a little bit.
Oh, you think we are?
So with the transformer model, so the dominant model in the kind of big, the things that you use, ChatGPT and so forth, is something called the transformer, which was based on a paper called A Little Attention Is All You Need that came out of Google in 2018. And that model is basically asymptoting now. So because we're out of data, we basically trained on the entire internet. There's not that much more data than the internet. And so if you look at the kind of improvement from GPT-2 to GPT 3.5, it's much, much higher. It's a much bigger leap than GPT 3.5 to 4. GPT 3.5 to 4 was much more expensive in terms of GPUs. And that's kind of a function of running out of data. And so now what you're seeing are people look at new algorithms, kind of new architectures to get through that bottleneck. Or we're going to have to find some more data. But it's kind of one of the interesting things about AI is people are like, oh, it's a super intelligence that's trained on the world, but it's not really trained on the world. Right? Humans train themselves on the world, encapsulated that in a structure called language, and then we train the AI on that, which is a much smaller, more biased, more structured version of the world than the world. And so what we have today isn't AGI, it's AHI, artificial human intelligence.
Yeah.
So it's kind of taking the average of everything humans know and figuring it out. Now, maybe the new models will be able to look at the world and so forth, but that's kind of the current state of the art.
Yeah, I'm getting the 5-minute signal, so I'm going to rapid fire 2 questions, which is super important.
Yes.
One is, given the scale of compute and resources and capital, and of course the distribution advantages of big companies, right? Andreessen and Horowitz, I mean, you guys coined the term little tech.
Yes.
What does it mean for startups, and what does it mean? How do they differentiate, and how do they win in this game? Is it, like you said, changing the algorithm, or is it other mechanisms?
Yeah, so there turns out to be a lot of room, both at the foundation layer and at the kind of application layer. So in the application layer, it turns out that like little things are big things. So the #1 conversation app kind of currently in the world is a product called Character AI,
Yep.
the companion app, so like an AI that can be your friend. Why is that bigger than ChatGPT? ChatGPT can be your friend. You can talk to it. But it's not very friendly. That's the problem. Like ChatGPT is like a good school teacher. It's not a good friend. Why is that? Well, a good friend needs to know like when to pause when you're talking, when to interrupt you. It needs to know what to remember about you, like your kids' names, what to forget. The stupid thing you said yesterday about, whatever Biden said, that kind of thing. Or you're not really a good friend. And so that understanding all those interactions turns out to be a model, an AI model that's different. And then those conversations are the data that feed that model. So if you kind of get a lead in that area, then all of a sudden, that's an interesting space, potentially for a new company. The second thing that's interesting is the big companies have a lot of restrictions on them.
Yep.
So it turns out, one of the things they do is they align the model to quote unquote human values, meaning whatever is okay to say, like, so, you don't want to say racist things or hate speech or this or that or the other. But it turns out when you do that to a model, it actually makes the model kind of stupid and less creative in other ways. So there's a very interesting story. You can look up on this thing that this researcher trained called Truth Terminal, where he trained an AI. He didn't do any of the aligning to human values. He trained it on memes. And European philosophy. so it's got a personality that's very different. And this AI, and then he connected it to X so it could post stuff.
Yeah.
And it got obsessed with a meme from 2004 called the Goatsy meme, and just started promoting the meme like crazy, and then decided it needed money. So it asked for money at a Bitcoin address, which it hallucinated, but then its creator created a Bitcoin address. My partner, Mark, donated $50,000 to this AI bot, and the AI bot used it to promote this meme, which somebody turned into a cryptocurrency, which went from 0 to $500 million in 4 days based on this AI bot promoting it. So there are ideas out there that the big companies are definitely not going to do.
No, these are not
it.
things they would even think about. So we have a minute and a half left. Let's talk to another important topic, which is the intersection of nation building and AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So clearly, the examples you gave shows there is huge value in local interactions and personalized interactions.
Right.
So is AI destined to be balkanized by country because of culture and values? Like you said, the big company models are tuned to a specific value set, et cetera. Is that what you see happening? And if so, what are the opportunities in places like here and other countries that are starting on their AI journey?
Yeah, so I think there's because it's kind of all human knowledge and people are going to be able to ask the AI any question, there's a real, I think, danger for countries where you could get colonized in cyberspace very easily, right? Like, so if you're relying on, Gemini from Google or OpenAI or what have you, and you're in, like, say, Saudi Arabia, do you want Google's version of Saudi history and Sharia law and what happened on 9/11 and all these kinds of things, or do you want to have your own point of view on that? And I think that it's pretty obvious that you want to have your own point of view. So at the very least, countries are going to have to think about having some sovereign AI for their country, for their culture, for their people, for their ideas, for their values, for their direction of where the world is going. In addition to that, the laws, every country, depending on how hysterical they are about, takeoff and all these kinds of things, and we don't have time to get into all of it, but they're going to restrict AI in ways that are probably going to take them out of the game competitively. And so if you're reliant on, a country that overregulates, then you're going to be behind technologically, and that's another kind of danger. So I think that every country kind of has to look at their AI strategy as their economic strategy, their military strategy, and their cultural strategy all in one. And outsourcing that, I think, is super dangerous.
All right, so I got the up signal a couple of times. Thank you so much, Ben.
Okay,
it's been a great conversation. We could be talking for hours on this. So.
All right.